Hey guys, good morning. Today we'll be looking at a tier list that I plan to make specifically for the support units in this season's RTA. So I've done a challenge wherein I try to spam at least 2 to 3, in fact 2 to 4 support units. It's kind of tough and has been fun, but the amount of shenanigans and about amount of units that I have to go through to fight against with a set pool of units that don't necessarily counter has been tough, gonna say, but that's part of the fun. So let's just start with it. First, in the first pool, we have Charlotte. Just standard red Charlotte, Queen of the Swamp. You know her, you love her. She received a pretty substantial buff to how she plays. I'm not too privy with how she goes, but from what I've seen, she's seen more use as a 4-5 pick and as a DPS unit. Do I think that she's going to do is going to be a main staple in her draft? Not necessarily. Is it fun to play and see her do a Gale Wind? Yes, she is. So I'd say she could be a C or D tier. For now, I'll put her in C for Charlotte. Not too impressed. She does a lot of damage eventually. We've seen her being picked, I believe, in the E7 Masters. I forgot who, but she has been picked in a more competitive pro scene, right? And who doesn't love to see us spinning blades of tornado doom? Next, it would be Dien. Not Emilian, just good old classic Dien. So the Saintess has been quite more used compared to before because of the recent changes he has. She's still a really good solid unit to have. If I were going to say how and when you're going to draft her, it's important to know that there's a couple of things that changes how you play with her. Initially, she has like a, I believe, crit resistance, but now she has a increased defense and increased pen rest, I believe, for 3 turns, and a CR push. Additionally, her exclusive equipment gives her 10 speed, really good, and I think her second EE gives Dispel on skill 2 for 2 debuffs, if I remember correctly. So, to be frank, she's a really solid unit to pick in terms of the support units to go for. If we're looking for a Soul Weaver that allows us to mitigate some of the pen damage units, it's really good. So, this is, I think personally, her kit and how she is right now makes her a viable pick for in terms of having a Soul Weaver, right? I'd say A, could be a B. We don't typically see her quite often. If we look at the stats currently, let's see. E7 stove. So if we look here in the stats for DN specifically, her pick rate has increased. 40% win rate. Not too bad. So she's currently strong against units as such as, no, not strong against. She's weak against Biblis, of course. Giras, yes. Just because of Giras's skill 2 and Boss Arunka. Okay, this is understandable. But she's been seen to have a lot of uses as of late. And just because of the amount of utility she provides, if you do pick her for your support units, it's still a really good option. Not bad, not bad. I'd say because of that, it increases the chance going to A, in my opinion. Next, one of the strongest units in epicseven, Green Celine or Base Celine, the auntie. So there's not much to be said with Celine. I'm not familiar what specifically EE she has. I think her EE right now is target the highest attack enemy on skill non-combat skill. Oops. So let's double check it. And there's not much to be said. She's one of the strongest units in Epic 7. And since typically for support units, their stats are on the average. So this is just based on the big data or the E7 data analytics thing. So right now, her stats is 3.9 the attack, 194 speed, 100% crit rate, and 330. I just checked in the game. It's a highest damage, highest attack enemy. So this is a really good option to go for. Really strong, depending on who you're targeting or who the uh enemy is drafting. Celine could really change up how the gameplay goes. And there's not much to be said. She does a lot of damage just because we're skill 3 and skill 2. And her skill 2, I believe, because of how it targets specific units, we've seen a lot of units as of recent that scale with attack percent. So it's really useful to go for her whenever you have the chance, especially when the right side goes for for skills, right? Non-attack skills. And don't forget, I believe skill 3 ignores damage sharing. Very important. Really good, really good. There's nothing much to say. Next, Landy. One of the units that dominated years back hasn't seen much use, although there have been changes for, I believe, Wall of Order. She hasn't seen a lot of play as of recent. We've seen her being picked in E7 Masters, right? She's still a solid option. However, with how the units are currently, Setsuka, Bosaronka, Biblis, her relevance in this meta's RTA hasn't been good, to be frank. There are some players, I believe in Legend, I'm not sure, who use her. We've seen her being used in RTA, we've seen her being used in U7 Masters. She's still a solid DPS unit, but the fact that there are so many units that counter her makes me think that she goes to C, maybe high C, B, but more notably C or D. I think it's more likely you're going to pick Charlotte over her, which is a crazy thing to say. If we look at how she was originally played years back, that's unfortunate. Next, oops. Thank you, Cecilia Bot, by the way, for this tier list maker. Really amazing. Next, Belayan. Nothing to be said about here. For this rotation's Belayan, I believe. Okay, before we talk about how Belayan is right now and her built-in current RTA, Belayan blocks souls, which is one of the key mechanics in RTA, right? There's a lot of mages, there's a lot of books, there are a lot of book alternatives. So she's one of the best units currently in RTA. And she's decently geared. I believe she has 3F, which is extra damage based on max HP. She does a lot of things. The most notable thing she does is counter Frieren and counter souls. So her being in her team, she has counter set in her build right now. Really good. I have no notes. One of the best units you can pick for 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on who you're going for. Frieren is still very oppressive. A lot of units utilize souls anyway. Really good unit. No notes. Next would be plain old, good old life Yola. So this forehead girl has seen more play as of recent. I'm not too sure how much it got improved. I think. Okay, wait. Let's look at the numbers here, right? Your analysis. Okay, rank 45% in win rate. This is amazing. Pick rate, not too much. She's seen more play as being a 4-5 pick. So based on these statistics, she's frankly a really good character right now. She has, I believe, holy sac, holy sacrifice for current artifact, and she's a really good unit to counteract a lot of other units that have like counterattacks or have a lot of DPS in terms of AOE. So right now, Yulha is the seventh most picked units in RTA, and her being in support pool gives us the option for players that are under like camp to have units that counteract, like let's say free reign for example, late arbiter Vildred, yeah, who else? Salome, RNL. It's pretty. I think she's a pretty good option so far, given that there's so many units that with counterattacks or attacks with AOE, and her being able to punish those units or reflect damage is very impressive. So there's some things that can consider as well. Her current E is E2, which increases the damage reflect by 20%. 20% is a lot. Initially, wait, I forgot. So initially, Yulha skill 2 is 30%, I believe. I'm not too familiar with her game. Yeah, Yulha has 40% reflect. With the additional 20%, or was it 30? With the additional 20%, 60% reflect damage is so oppressive if you're fighting against units with a lot of AoE. So this is really good against Freeren at the moment. I'd say she's one of the better knights. I'd give her a solid beat there. You'd see more use from her, actually. Maybe actually let's bump her up to A. Really good, really good, really good. Next, you'd be surprised who's included in this support rotation, and that'd be Harsetti. Harsetti, still one of the most pre-banned units in the game. She's dominated it for so long. And what she does is so oppressive. Right now, she's the fifth most pre-banned unit. Surprising, right? And her being in the pool of support units allows a lot of players to play to punish people that are faster than them. If they use like RNL, for example, or they're just innately fast with like speed imprint, having the option to fight against those kinds of players makes it a really beneficial thing to have. Currently, Harsetti has a Fairy Tale of the Nightmare, I believe, and it's a really good thing to consider when you're drafting her. So right now, I think this is a hands down, of course, S tier. So what you could go for as a player is that you allow Harsetti to go through. For example, if your second pick, let Harsetti through. If your first pick, let Harsetti through, probably. Her being in the pool allows us to play more flexibly and be able to punish in their end. There's still other ways to play her. You don't necessarily have to pre-ban her. Just be cognizant in the fact that Harsetti is an available unit, and we should utilize the fact that if you're not necessarily a fast player, right? She's a really good option to pull from when in your support pool. Next, you love her. We've seen a lot of her during the E7 Masters. Sorry. So what makes Tori unique is that she's a more safer unit. I put air quotes over here. So currently, Tori is a 26th most picked unit. Wow, that's impressive. So what makes Tori unique is that her cascade, her stealth, her barrier, and her safe, quote unquote safety, allows us to make her a really solid option when it comes to single target, specifically DPS. So you're typically going to pair her up with Boss Arunka, Biblis, Estelle, Ruel. So you want to protect her as much as possible. And you really want to play her in such a way that you're letting her shine in drafting. So currently she's doing really well against units such as Bystander Hua Young, right? Because of extra damage amount. And I think she's a really solid 8 tier. Interesting. She's a really solid 8 tier. Really good single target damage. This a lot allows us to bypass some of the shenanigans that some players have. Like I've said before, Bystander Hua Young. This cascade alone makes it a really good chunk of damage. Okay, next. Fallen Cecilia. One of the important units against extra damage or extra damage specifically. She hasn't seen much usage as of late because there's not a lot of units that have extra attack as of moment. Renak has seen fewer and fewer usage in this season's RTA. Doesn't necessarily mean she's a bad player. So depending on who you're fighting against, you have to be know why you pick Fallen Cecilia in the first place. You typically go for Fallen Cecilia against Renak initially. Maybe units such as Boss Aranka. Who else? Just pretty those two, top of my head. This doesn't necessarily make her a bad unit. However, if we're talking about like efficiency, she's going to be your 4-5 pick. Perhaps your second 2, 4, or 5 pick, depending on how you draft. She's still a really strong unit to know and how to play with. Actually, I'm not sure if you'll say, nah, I'll put her A. I'm biased. But I've seen Fallen Cecilia be used less and less as the game goes on, with the fact that we're trying to. We've seen the trend where we're seeing less fixed damage. Okay, next. Good old Destina. We've seen the memes of Destina, Carmen, Albedo. Although it's been like a couple of years already, this doesn't necessarily make her a bad unit. However, she's currently the. Oh, she hasn't been getting any games at all. She's not a bad unit per se. She's just that there are other units that are more quote unquote optimal to draft with. Like for example, I'd pick DN more than Destina just because of how slow she is currently. And there are a lot of things that hinder the how effective Destina is currently. So because of things like rupture, not rupture. I keep forgetting. GRS has a collapse, for example. She's not being paired that well. But if we draft her along with characters such as Estelle, Don't Question Bologna, or we play her like a. Mm, I'm not sure. She's not a bad unit, but do know that there are a lot of injury units. There are a lot of units with collapse. Anything that involves reducing their max HP hinders the scene quite a bit. And she's not a bad unit. Let's just say She's definitely not a bad unit to have in the pool. But mm, would I say she's a bad thing to consider? No. So currently, let's see an arena. She's running a unfading memories, which is the end's artifact, as well as skill E3, which is increased CR bar of the target by 20% on her skill 2. But you know what? With CR manipulation, Destina can be like high B in my opinion. Yeah, I could see some usage. I'd say you'd more likely pick her 4 5 rather than, and if you have no other options, not too bad. Although she's definitely not being as picked as often compared to before. Okay, next one. Leinhard Sermia. We're still recording? Yes, we are. Uh, so there's a sad fact that LHC isn't being used as often as before. Her win rate has seemed to be really falling off. I'm not sure as of why. It's interesting because there's so many units that have extra attacks or have like those activated effects such as counter or like like counters. So the unique thing here is that you typically want to pick LHC against units that have those kinds of things, such as Bosarunka, Lone Crescent Bellona, Setsuka, for example. However, if we look at their current win rate, LHC has been doing pretty badly. And although we can like pick against them if we go for like Perfume or Biblis or Bosarunka ourselves, her win rate has been too good. However, if we're thinking about this in the sentiment of it's going to this is a support unit tier list, right? So it's going to be units that are coming from champion and below. I think she deals quite a bit amount of damage. The damage that enemies are able to mitigate could hinder some of it. But I still think she's still a good unit. I could be coping here. I'd say she'd still be in a B tier though. That's an unfortunate because in if we think about her kit and how the current meta is, you would expect that she'd be a more oppressive unit. However, it isn't necessarily the case at the moment. Okay, next one. Fairy Tale Tenebria. Ro- Okay. So F10's entire kit or entire stack is that she's a fast unit, she has quite a bit of effectiveness, and her entire thing surrounds the fact that you're playing around redirect provoke, which is a debuff introduced along with F10A. So right now she's with her own artifact, I believe, with the E3, which dispels additional buff when using Tea Party, which is her skill tree. So you're typically going to play F10A as a debuff unit, and you're trying to make enemies target. You're trying to inflict a lot of redirect provoke to enable her skill too, which is the card shuffle thing. She's seen quite a few wins if you look at the stats. However, she's picked so few. Currently, she has like a 0.03 pick rate, and that's pretty sad. If we look at the how she does against units with in the current meta, such as Notos, Bosarunka, she's not being used to win, to be frank. So this is like a problem in that sense where even if we inflict the debuffs, even if we have the redirect provoke, the things that she contributes isn't enough necessarily to warrant her to be used or to be considered. But there are scenarios wherein we can utilize the fact that she can debuff quite well. So if we think about units, if we go for the consideration right side has only single target units, we could benefit from playing like F10. But as of the moment, she goes in D tier. Next one, Festive Ida. So Festive Ida, quite frankly, I was surprised how many times I picked Festive Ida during my challenge. It's just the fact that the amount of things and amount of damage he does, and somehow some of the utility she provides from her skill one and her stunts makes her a really viable pick, in my opinion. But the fact remains that it's a conditional damage. However, there's definitely ways to activate her, especially when we're fighting against unit right side team that does a lot of AoE attacks, which is a very common thing, to be frank. She's a really good option at the moment. If you think about it, she's really good against units like Freeren, although the win rate against Freeren is kind of low. I think she's still a really solid option to consider for. I'd say in a higher B, maybe low A's. Very good unit. So you definitely want to play her. You want to know how to play her through the use of her shyness, right? Because shyness plus her skill tree deals a lot of damage. And from that alone, you can break through free range barrier, for example. And it's a lot of damage. I'm not sure how else to say it, but she's still a really solid option to consider. One of my most picked units, to say the least. Okay, next one. Liti, one of the summer units right now. So, Liti has seen more and more picks as of the moment. Her win rate isn't looking that great. However, she's still a really solid unit to play against just because of her Extinct, Frostbite, and sometimes you can play her pretty fast. So currently, she has her own artifact, Prayers of Solitude, which increases her health. And she has E3, which can trigger a counterattack when using Freeze Over, which is her skill 2, skill 3, no, skill 3. Skill 3, yeah. So you typically play her against a lot of things. The main thing that people go for is that Extinct. There's a lot of units that have self revive and restrict, so they are not able to see our manipulation. I think she's a solid unit to consider. She's decently fast if we look at her stats in the support pool. There are some options that we can think about. She's 286 speed. She has an extra attack, and there's a potential that Frostbite hinders them quite a bit. I think she's a A tier. B tier, maybe. No. I think A tier. No. B tier. This also goes through like a damage share, I believe, right? No? Okay, let's see it. No, it penetrates defense. It's proportional max HP. Yeah, so I think Lidi has a potential to go through a lot of defensive options, especially with her Def Pen. And it's 100% Def Pen too. Really interesting. So I'd say it's higher B, maybe low C. Upper left. Next one is Kid Aiden. New Kid Aiden. So New Kid Aiden used to be one of the more used picked units in the previous, like a couple of seasons ago, but she isn't too used at the moment. She suffers a lot against the newer characters such as Setsuka, Bosaronka, Estelle, Biblis, especially LCB, Rainak. So there's a lot of things. So you typically pick her against her Seti, but even then, it's not. It's like a weird point flip in that manner. She's not. I've seen a lot of games wherein I wished I could have picked her, but when I do pick her, she doesn't shine enough to like change the outcome of the games. I think she's still a solid B tier. She's definitely better than these two. Maybe C tier. Let's just keep it at that. So what she does is that she deals injury damage against enemies and then detonates those injury damage based on the missing HP on injury inflicted. Okay, last, certainly not the least, B Dom or Bunny Dom. So there's a lot of units with extra turns right now in the game. So she will always see some picks. Currently, she has a 50%, 52% win rate, which is not bad at all. She is good against characters such as Renak, Salome, Arnel, and the like. We have to be really. We don't necessarily have. We have to be, as players, we should know which characters has the extra attack modifiers. And Bunny Dom allows us to play more safer. She has a immunity, I believe, in skill tree. It's been a while since I picked her, but she's still a really safe option. Not necessarily safe option. She gives us a better defensive options against those types of characters. I'd say she's higher tier than Dien. I think she's the highest tier in A tier, personally. Her being able to counter all the extra attack units with her skill null and skill effect null allows us to play against those extra turn characters quite well. So that being said, this is my tier list. This is subject to change, but I think it's a fairly accurate tier list at the moment. And that's it for the video, guys. Thanks for watching.